Hey, Miss Marilyn.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
That's great.
Okay, we're asking everyone to mute for now.
All right.
Okay, we're going to begin.
Okay, I think we're on. Is this thing on? Welcome, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Maybe it's good morning. My name is Tracy Gardner, and I'm Vice President for Policy Advocacy at Legal Action Center. We are a law and policy organization focused on criminal justice, addiction, and HIV. And we're the only law and policy organization that does this work on these three issues and at the intersection. You are joining us for our No Health, No Justice, which is a project of the Legal Action Center. No Health, No Justice looks at the mass incarceration and the impact of systemic and institutional racism in the criminal justice and healthcare systems, which contributes to mass incarceration. And we work in different jurisdictions around the country with advocates and leadership and people with direct lived experience to advance good public policy that addresses the intersection of health and justice. So today we are here talking about restoring communities beyond the pandemic. When we originally conceived of this, we were, those of us, some of us in New York, but talking all around the country about the especially acute impact on people involved in the criminal justice system and on communities that have struggled with mass incarceration and over-policing and other excesses of justice, and that the link between community health and correctional health and our policy decisions that have taken money away from community health and put toward public safety is very much manifesting COVID. Before COVID, we were still struggling with an overdose epidemic, which was showing that intersection being one that was also especially lethal to communities of color. And so, you know, this discussion is going to be about how to respond in innovative ways to emergencies. And we're hoping that people will be able to hear from practitioners who've joined us today about their approaches and be able to maybe adapt or model some of the examples that we talk about. We don't really have we have a question and answer and a chat available. The chat has a link to all of the organizations that our attendees are connected to. And we are going to gather questions and put out a fact sheet, survey and fact sheet as quickly as possible. I believe the survey is going out tomorrow. And so we want to develop that as a compilation of the collective wisdom of our panelists, and also reflect back out the questions and concerns from attendees for this webinar. I would be remiss in not mentioning that as we were struggling and to address the dimensions of the impact of COVID, the protests that have been all over the country prompted by the brutal and videoed murder of George Floyd has also elevated the urgency and the interconnection of these issues. And so, you know, we have some speakers with us from Atlanta. The young man who was sitting in his car drunk, there were so many options for how to respond to him that would not have ended up in his death. And I think that that's something that we should keep in mind about the opportunity and necessity to change the way we approach individuals who are, in this case, not even involved in the criminal justice system, but using policing and a policing mindset to address community needs. There's a great deal that's going on that's really looking at the need to hashtag defund the police. And while that may or may not happen, it is clear that we need to redirect resources to strategies that we know work and that are not lethal and that contribute to the health of the communities we care about. So with that, I want to introduce someone whose work I have admired for quite some time. And I am just short of a fangirl because I harass him to work with him, and we've had many occasions to work together and partner on projects and issues that are at the intersection of health and justice in New York. And so I'd like to introduce Jeff Coots from Punishment to Public Health at the John Jay College for Criminal Justice in New York.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to Legal Action Center for organizing this and for everyone who is attending here for taking some time out of your day to hear from us about some of the things that are happening in New York and some of the ways we are hoping to contribute to some of the decarceration efforts and certainly some of the efforts to reallocate resources to different types of solutions moving forward. So again, my name is Jeff Coots. I work at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I direct the From Punishment to Public Health initiative there. We call it P2PH for short, since the full name is a mouthful. We launched this project back in 2013 as a collaboration between John Jay College and the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, with the idea that there were a lot of reforms happening in healthcare. There was a lot of reforms happening in criminal justice, and we wanted to make sure that those reform efforts were better aligned and that we could start to facilitate some conversations across sectors so that we would be taking advantage of each other's advances in the field and not be getting caught off guard. And, you know, even within healthcare and within criminal justice, there are silos that we struggle to overcome. And so regular efforts to convene stakeholders in those situations has shown to bear some fruit. And I've been lucky enough to work with Tracy and several of her colleagues and learn from them about, you know, how to take a good idea, maybe a pilot program, and really make that the new normal. So I am still learning and have much to learn from Tracy on that front. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight there, I don't know if folks were able to access the PowerPoint that I put up there. If you're not able to follow along, I'll be brief enough, but to look back for reference, one of the things that we had in our mission statement early on with P2PH was the idea that we wanted to position public health interventions to be successful and held accountable to better health, safety, and social justice outcomes. And so with that, we've had some experience in trying to work with justice stakeholders, work with healthcare providers, work with social service agencies to reposition the way that we respond to things. One of our early successes was in reducing the arrest of homeless individuals who seek shelter on the subway systems on the overnight, and work to build a joint patrol of social workers and transit offices who were responding to those situations, reducing arrests and increasing uptake of short-term housing solutions. And so those are the types of things that we look forward to working on in the months and years ahead. And hopefully we can take advantage of some of the social movement that Tracy articulated, where there does seem to be more appetite for these types of solutions. So one of the things I wanted to highlight today was several of the things that are going on in New York, and give folks from outside the New York area a slice of how New York City government and CBOs have tried to respond to COVID, and opportunities that we see to build on the successes from that piece. So in the slideshow, if everyone's looking at it, I'm jumping ahead to slide number 6, which has the green heading. So we facilitate the New York City Health and Justice Working Group with Legal Action Center. And this is a chance where we try to stimulate cross-sector dialogues between about 60 agencies that participate on a fairly regular basis: government, nonprofit, private agencies. We have managed care and health home agencies, direct service providers, and the like. Excuse me. And we've gotten some nice presentations in the last few months from government stakeholders about some of the changes that they're making during the COVID crisis, and how they are responding with some public health solutions. And so we wanted to highlight those. So one thing to recognize is that this all happens within the context of significant efforts to reduce the Rikers Island, the city jail population, already underway. So in 2013, the average daily population was 11,700, just about. So we have one of the biggest jails in the country. Obviously, Chicago and Los Angeles are the other two that kind of rival New York City in size. But by February of 2020, we had that number down to 5,400 individuals on February 24th. So we had already cut the population almost in half through a range of strategies, many of which were making different decisions about who we really needed to detain in the jail. And then recognizing that the jail itself was a public health vulnerability, the mayor's office and several of the agencies around the city worked to quickly reduce that population. And so between February 24th, when we had 5,400 clients inside, by June 14th, we had that number down under 4,000. And so we had another 23% or so reduction. One of the things we see in this trend, both the things that we were doing to reduce the jail population generally and in the COVID efforts, is that clients with mental health issues get stuck. And there's several reasons for that. But most of it is we don't have great solutions for it in the community. And so we hold on to these people in the jail as if that's our best strategy. And so that's one of the things that, as we come out of the COVID readiness piece, we still need to be paying attention to the fact that it's not just folks with substance use needs, but recognizing that mental health challenges are a significant population that we don't do well when the police are responding to them, and once they get stuck once they enter the jail, I should say, they tend to get stuck there, and that is a persistent challenge. And unfortunately, with the successes we had in reducing the other populations, Rikers now joins many of the smaller county jails around the country in being a majority mental health population. And so our jail is now a majority mental health facility, like so many others. So one of the ways we got to these reductions, both earlier and more quickly, and we're going to hear from one of these providers later on, we brought a couple of the New York providers, is we developed or significantly expanded in New York City the utilization of a program called Supervised Release. Now, not to confuse with Supervised Release on the federal level, which is what they call probation, or parole rather, but in New York City, Supervised Release is essentially saying, we're going to assign somebody a caseworker who's going to help them show up for court. Because in New York State, we don't have a dangerousness provision for jail detention. It is the only purpose that we allow judges and district attorneys to detain somebody is if we think they are going to fail to appear to their next court date. And so we have a risk tool that we use for that. And by changing the risk tool a bit, and then by providing some additional services to help people keep in touch with that, things like text messages, weekly check-ins, health and social service connections when that's necessary, we've been able to operate the justice system in New York with a much smaller jail population. And so we'll hear a little bit more from Giles later about how supervised release has adapted even within COVID. And then one of the biggest successes that I think we've seen in New York City, and not just for the criminal justice populations, but for several other vulnerable populations, is that the government has just started buying more hotel rooms and putting people in hotels. And so we're using this housing first policy in a pandemic, recognizing that there are significant health benefits to simply housing people and then caring for them. And I think it was something we saw as necessary through the stay-at-home orders. If you don't have a home, you can't stay there. And so the government stepped in and funded that. And we just had a big rally yesterday with several of the partners around the city talking about the fact that funding runs out at the end of June. And so we've put all these people in hotels to keep them safe, and we need to be mindful of the need to allocate more resources and to really have a plan to step them down. One of the other really interesting things is we saw a big increase in buprenorphine uptake. So we had been working to get more physicians certified so that they could be doing that. And during the COVID moment, we recognized that was one of the strategies that we had. And the state loosened some regulations around the length of methadone dosage that we were allowed to provide, and we could even be delivering it to the people that were in the hotels. So we pulled back during COVID on a lot of the regulations that were restricting access to treatment, and those are some of the things that we really want to pay attention to in the months ahead as we come out of COVID, that we want to sustain those regulatory gains and advantages that we've seen both at the city and the state level, so that we can serve these clients that we know are challenging to initiate and then engage ongoing. And then I'll say the final thing that we've noticed here is that parole revocation is still a real challenge. It's one of the weak points in our city jail system. It's the only population that has been increasing in recent years. And we still have several hundred technical parole violation clients that are on Rikers during the COVID era. And that is because parole is a state function. And so the city, although it has some leeway in making other types of releases, is still in an agreement with the state to house those individuals. And so I highlight that to say just the importance of the kind of local and state collaboration and keeping those lines of communication open. And again, I'll end where I started. That's something that Tracy and Legal Action Center are helping us to think a bit more about and be more creative in the ways to bring those partners to bear. So, I am pleased to be introducing Giles, who is going to be talking a little bit more about supervised release. So Giles from Cases, which is one of our founding partners of P2PH. Giles, please take over from here and share with the good people all the good work that you guys are doing.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today and just talk about all these really important topics. And thank you for setting the table for me with supervised release. So my name is Giles Maligal. I'm the Senior Director of Pretrial Services. So I run at Cases, so I run supervised release and a few other things that fall under the pretrial court services realm at Cases. So I thought a good place to start in just understanding how COVID has impacted our work and working with individuals who are at risk of incarceration or detainment is really to start with an initiative that was started by the mayor's office and really quick time. We developed this program, I would say, over a weekend, several conference calls with our city funders, and they really came to us and said, we have a significant concern about a potential burgeoning health crisis that could develop in our largest city jail and could further impact the rest of the city. We were very responsive to their needs and jumped on the task, which was pretty monumental for the amount of work that we had to get done in a short period of time. So just to frame, I mean, we've been working remotely, as I'm sure all the rest of you have in some capacity since the COVID outbreak happened. And what we developed along with our other supervised release partners in the city was what we refer to as the early release program. Some people would say the 6A program, and that refers to a work release provision for the Department of Corrections that allows them to release people early from jail. So this was the approach, was to try to get people with a short amount of time left on their sentence, released back into the community with some element of supervision and support so that we could ensure they were getting their needs met, and that they were able to, begin that process of reentry. And I think one thing that we noticed very soon into this program was that there was a slight change in needs and motivation for this population. So we're used to working with people in the pretrial realm where they have ongoing court dates, and there's always a judge monitoring their progress with their requirements under supervised release. With these individuals were reentry folks. So these are people who are serving out a few months or maybe even just a week on a sentence in the community. So we found it's really essential for us to understand the needs of this population, and then really the resulting motivating factors for really doing well in the program and ensuring that there was no ultimate consequence of them being returned back to the correctional facility. And as well, we were challenged with the lower level nature of some of the charges that these people were serving out sentences for, which the lower levels of charges can sometimes lead to less motivation with participating in the program. So we looked at how challenging it is to engage with this specific population when we're working remotely. So we had a staff of social workers and caseworkers and peers who really had to adapt to a new assessment form that was much briefer and that allowed them to really hit on our different need areas that we typically try to look at, but then do that in a way that they can engage that person over the phone, which was at the start was very challenging, I have to admit. But they've developed the different techniques as far as maybe we space out some of these conversations, maybe we put limits on the length of time that we're speaking to people, and maybe we just have more frequent contacts with people so that we can, really eventually get to really a depth of understanding where their needs are. We saw the city respond by, as Jeff mentioned, putting people in hotels, and we were very concerned and tried to be proactive about meeting the needs of people who were coming out of incarceration and who also were telling us that they were homeless. But we had situations where people were returning back to their home and their landlord said, oh, you're a person who's coming out of jail. You may have COVID, so I'm not letting you back into the place you were renting prior to you going to Rikers Island, which is our city jail. And we saw other challenges, individuals who were being placed into these hotels and having difficulties with the staff in the hotels. And these are not shelters. These are not places that are staffed by people who are responsive to their needs or are patient enough to work with them as they're going about their regular day-to-day functions. We were also dealing with limited opportunities for employment, and the need for services was really great with this population. We were seeing a high rate of SMI, serious mental illness, as well as comorbid substance use conditions, and people who really needed to be connected to care very quickly, and trying to game out and manage solutions for connecting people to service providers when some of them were very leery of taking new individuals, say, into an inpatient rehab program or some other type of detox that was the service that we assessed that person really needed. I'm happy to say we're sort of halfway, I would say, through working with this group of people, and we've been able to have a lot of success. We're just about almost at 100% compliance right now with the 45 or so people who are remaining on the program. And this means that they're checking in with us on a daily basis, including on the weekends. So, they're really having an option to avail themselves of just counseling over the phone, connections to resources, and also connections to other providers that we work with who provide housing, treatment, and other services to them. In addition, in supervised release, we work with youth as well. So we serve people who are 16 and 17 as well, and who may have family court cases. And we were very concerned by the lack of the summer youth employment program, which we are a vendor for, and we see hundreds of young people come through our doors every summer to get internship experience and learn job skills and soft skills, really help set them up for a good future working with other individuals as they move on. And so what we did is we set up our own program. You know, we found some money in our budget to allocate to purchasing Chromebooks for people. We also connected people with phones and data plans. We were able to successfully recruit a series of speakers to hold virtual series with these participants so that they could be engaged, they could be active, and also so that they might be able to retrieve some incentive and some financial benefit. So we're providing them all with a weekly incentive and a stipend for participation in the program. And then they're also getting a very intensive look at how we can connect them to other services in the community. So what we found is it's been a really big success. And, you know, I think COVID has really pushed us to, you know, consider things like giving a laptop to a client, which is something maybe 10 years ago when I was starting out as a social worker might have been sort of inconceivable. And now we're at this point where that's really the tool that's really going to connect us and really enable that person to avail themselves of all the resources that they might need, you know, really to succeed. And you know, and lastly, I just like to say what we've been really hearing from our participants, especially our younger people, is really a need for there to be an outlet for their frustration, an outlet for their anger, and an outlet for their hurt and their pain, for everything they're really going through right now. I think that's really been a commonality with our staff as well, but it's really been able to open some doors and start conversations that have really been fruitful and have helped them, I think, have that place to let that release valve out so that it doesn't come out in some other way that might, you know, cause them additional harm or anything else that might be, you know, injurious to their health. So with that, I wanted to pass along to a provider that we know, you know, and work with very often, the Fountain House program, and particularly Nicholas Becerra over there.
Thanks, Giles, so much for the introduction. My name is Nicholas, and I'm here representing Fountain House with my colleague Nancy Young. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about who we are and how during the global pandemic we pivoted services. But before I do that, I want Clubhouse landing page, which you can see and kind of click around if you want more information. And the other link is to Clubhouse International. And that's where you can find a Fountain House modeled program in your community. But I'll start kind of from the very top. So Fountain House, we were founded in 1948. We are a community-based mental health recovery center and public health nonprofit. We help people with serious mental illness live independently and thrive in the community. The model we develop, which is called Clubhouse, engages people in their own recovery, and in doing so, addresses two of the overarching challenges that we feel plagues our folks the most, stigma and social isolation. So that said, our approach revolves around giving people a place and purpose, as well as a robust social network of support. And we do that through the creation of meaningful work, kind of the need to be needed. We think that provides a lot of motivation for people to stay in recovery and on. At a Clubhouse, which operates much like it's getting access to housing, they get access to educational services, employment opportunities, they get access to integrated care. Essentially, we address the social determinants of health and the social inequities that accompany that. And I think kind of while we're in this environment, you know, where the assault on Black and brown lives has come to the fore of our conversation. We know that our approach lends itself to uplifting these communities because we help to address the systemic issues around access. And we've got really great outcomes. You know, our model has been proven to reduce hospitalizations. We create cost savings relative to Medicaid. And importantly, you know, we help to reduce recidivism rates. Ours is almost non-existent. And for us, that was really significant because 25% of our members are justice impacted. And so that was a really big deal for us. More than 300 clubhouses
Okay.
around
Nicholas,
the
Nicholas,
world.
yikes. Nicholas, your
Hi.
connection is a little
Yes.
choppy and we're missing all of your gold, or all of your golden knowledge.
Oh no.
So
Maybe I should turn off my video.
you can do that. You can do that just to, go ahead. Let's see if that helps.
All right. Can everyone hear me a little bit better?
Yes.
All right. So let me pick up. So I think I'm going to pick up around the outcomes. You know, we have very low recidivism rates in our community, and that's significant for us because 25% are justice impacted. But in addition to that, we've got a global infrastructure. We've got more than 300 clubhouses around the world modeled after us in 34 countries, serving approximately 100,000 people around the globe. And so saying all this, you know, you can imagine how when COVID hit, it kind of struck at the very heart of our model, the idea of side-by-side meaningful work. Moreover, our folks are considered high risk for contracting COVID. You know, a lot of them live with diabetes, hypertension, and other physical health complications. And so we knew we had to pivot quickly to providing services online. And we needed to make sure that our members were safely isolated physically, but still connected to the community and the services that are so critical to their recovery. And so with that, we developed the Virtual Clubhouse, and we used already existing tech platforms to essentially recreate the physical design of the program in the virtual space. And so now that it's up and running and we've had a lot of great success, we're looking at how the model lends itself to others, you know, segments of our population, namely justice impacted people. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to my colleague, Nancy Young, who can tell you more about the program itself. And I apologize for my choppy internet.
Hi, everybody. So thank you so much for having us. What I'm here to do is explain to you a little more about how our virtual clubhouse has operated. And you can see with the link that Nicholas shared with you in the chat, if you want to learn a little bit more about it. So as Nicholas said, Fountain House was established by its members as a clubhouse, as a place to meet and to design ways to recover and heal together. So members and staff run the clubhouse together and build and improve upon this intentional community that we share. We work together side by side. We have 300 members coming in a day. They choose to come in. They choose where and with whom to volunteer their time. They hire new staff. They help with building maintenance, policy decisions, advocacy, meal prep, intake, orientation of new members, and they serve on the board of directors. So, you know, the purpose of our community is to build and maintain these meaningful relationships and to build a sense of belonging and choice. So when our doors are open, our physical space is really our pride and joy. And as Nicholas said, this has been a real challenge for us because, you know, our members give daily tours and people are always commenting on how beautiful and home-like our clubhouse is. So to close that space and transition to this social isolation was a huge challenge for all of us. We really had to design a new clubhouse, a virtual clubhouse that allowed us to really remain close and connected with our members, to those with and without technology. So, you know, we started with using 3 existing platforms and sort of tried to mimic the clubhouse itself. So Facebook being our living room, our lobby, or our place that members can enter, catch up with friends, engage in a relaxed social way. We went to 700 members in our new Facebook group. We set up a Slack workspace as a way for groups and members to chat with each other about work that we're doing to run the Clubhouse. And now we have over 550 members using this tool now. It's where the meaningful work is organized. It reminds members that they're needed, and it motivates them to continue to be part of the community. And lastly, we use Zoom meetings, as we are right now, to hold community meetings, to update people, to involve everybody in decision making, which is another crucial part of our model. So many staff and members feel that the participation in these platforms has really engaged members who were previously disconnected, and that some active members even participate more. So, we really struggled with not having two separate communities. So we basically have done a lot of what Giles was mentioning before. We delivered technology to our members. We've delivered over 50 smartphones and 20 laptops. Members have been providing tech help to those who need to get up to speed. We have working groups of members who get together and talk and plan. We deliver to those who don't have technology, who don't either want it or need to get up to speed with some tech help, but we deliver mask making materials, we deliver newsletters, we deliver seeds to plant for our garden at our farm. We help people through a phone pal system and a pen pal system, and we continue to operate a warm line staffed by our peers. And we do video teleconference group chats with nursing homes, members in nursing homes. So, what we've done with our work has been the most challenging, but we've managed to continue to have members do data entry at home to support each other in their wellness and their education and their jobs. We deliver meals and groceries to those who can't leave home. And, we connect with people both who have technology and don't have technology. And as Nicholas was mentioning, we have about 25% of our membership with some justice involvement. And what we have done is really ramped up that program and strengthened our partnerships by reaching out to agencies that are already serving this population in New York City, like CASES, explaining what our community can offer, developing individualized plans to introduce their clients who have serious mental illness to Fountain House, and to, think about the fact that so many people are coming to us with more complex needs and stress. And what we've done is put together a new program that will hopefully decrease this stress and create a nice on-ramp to our program by assigning a buddy or a member who would like to work with a potential member to Fountain House, going to them where they're staying, getting to know them and their interests, and showing them around our virtual community, delivering technology if they don't have it, showing them how to use it, connecting them to meetings, and basically then helping them apply for membership if they're interested, helping them get a psychiatric evaluation if they need one. And then once they become members, showing them around, introducing them around. And also one of the most important things about our community is really that once they do become members, people don't know that they've had a background of being involved with the justice system at all. So one of our biggest objectives is to be strengths-based and to remove any information about where somebody is coming from. So with that said, we feel that, we've been able to maintain our community and give the technology, information, and support that people need to maintain community. So that's all I have today. I thank you so much for letting Fountain House talk to you today. And we have our website in the chat. I want to introduce you to our next speaker from Atlanta, Georgia, Miss Marilyn Wynn from Women on the Rise. Thank you.
So, all right, thank you for the introduction. And thank you for having me on the panel today to talk about what we've done here in Atlanta. And I want to say, first of all, if Atlanta had listened to us from the beginning when we started to the campaign to Starve the Beast, Rashard Brooks would be alive today. So first of all, Women on the Rise, along with the Racial Justice Action Center, has always our ultimate goal has been to I don't want to use. I'm looking for a word. It's the ultimate words. The ultimate goal has always been to divert people from jails and find alternatives. And we move forward started with Ban the Box, and Ban the Box is asking employers to remove that box on the applications, asking you about your criminal history before even thinking about accepting you or giving you a job. So that was one of the things that we did that diverted people from going to the jail. Once we passed that legislation, some people were able to get jobs. Secondly, Atlanta had 81 city ordinances books, and those ordinances gave APD, which is Atlanta Police Department, authority to discretions to arrest, frisk, whatever they choose to want, for spitting on the sidewalk, owling, loitering, jaywalking, and things like that. Nothing serious, nothing that is criminal, nothing that is even misdemeanor. Is a city ordinance and what I call infractions. After that, and after we got rid of those ordinances, 41 of those, that was something else that diverted people from the Atlanta City Jail. The third thing that we did, we worked on when pre-arrest diversion, we call it PAD, where there's a collaboration with the Atlanta Police Department in a pilot area from the beginning. Police department it's a collaboration where if they feel like this person would benefit from services or a program, they would call PAD instead of taking these people to jail. So Moki, when she comes up, she would talk. So that is one of the initiatives that we also work on. Then we worked on reclassification of marijuana, where people were going to jail in Atlanta for a roach, a half of a joint, or less than an ounce of marijuana, and receiving jail time, sometime jail time, a lot as much as thousands of dollars, and plus arrest. So we were able to have that legislation reclassified to a non-arrestable offense and maximum fine of $75. And from there we work in Center for Human Rights to do bail reform. And so from there, all of those things right there, we call it starving the beast. So we actually starve the beast. It happened any given night in Atlanta, at least 700 to 800 people in the jail. So today, with all of the things that's going on, it's less than 50. And so this gave us the time to say, this is the time to now bring out the real sword. And what we wanted to do all along was close the Atlanta City Jail and repurpose the building into what we would call a Center for Equity, Wellness, Equity, and Freedom, and slow down Maryland. We've always, in a sense, we've always talked about defunding and demolish and defending our Black lives, but we never used the word defunding. And sometimes, we found that in a lot of times we didn't use the word, but we was doing it all at the same time. So now's the appropriate time to do it. So, and a thing that Women on the Rise does is we support women who are on the inside by going inside the prison, teaching them about employment development. So when they come out, they will know how to articulate their background to employers and get a job. We are now doing bailouts along with housing individuals as well, and teaching those individuals how to advocate for themselves and be a part of the movement. And on the state level, we are supporting the House Bill 288, which is record restriction. And if we can get record restriction passed, that will be a barrier, not just for people that are currently coming out of the system, but people have been out of the system for years. I have friends that have not been arrested in 40 years. They got arrested as a teenager that cannot get a place to live. they're homeless because of a background, something they did when they was a kid, and they're now 60 years old. They're senior citizens and still can't get a place to live. So we're actually supporting that legislation. And so these are the things that Women on the Rise is doing, along with trying to empower women of color to be encouraged to the work that we're doing now, because it is our time. And nobody sit at for us and plan for us. We have to sit at the table and orchestrate our own way out of this. And so I would like to introduce Smokey Macias.
Thank you, Miss Marilyn. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm just so appreciative, Miss M, of your work to make our city safer and more just. So appreciate getting to go after you. As Miss Marilyn said, I'm Moki Macias. I'm the Executive Director for the Atlanta Fulton Pre-Arrest Diversion Initiative. We provide an immediate alternative to arrest when police have detained somebody and have probable cause. So in the last 2 years, we've diverted over 200 people from our local jails, including the jail that Miss Marilyn spoke to, the Atlanta City Detention Center. And we've worked with folks we've diverted to remove legal barriers, secure housing, access community resources, and make positive changes to their lives. They're just to start, you know, there are a few core beliefs that inform our approach and that inform how we lift up solutions and what solutions we lift up. We know that people are struggling to survive in a system that punishes poverty, that stigmatizes mental health, and sees addiction as a moral failure. We know that the criminal legal system, from the creation of laws to the enforcement of laws to the meting out of punishment, is and has always been used to maintain white racial hierarchy and economic dominance. And we also know that that law enforcement has grown and grown and grown in the United States to the point where the criminal legal system has become the answer to pretty much every social problem, every issue of community concern, nuisance, or discomfort that comes up. And we hear it from the police officers that we work with, from the prosecutors that we work with, from the judges, and what we know from our communities, right? That this actually doesn't solve problems. People don't get more well, neighborhoods don't experience less disturbances, and we're stuck with a perverse rhetoric that about endlessly increasing punishments for very minor infractions. So pre-arrest diversion was envisioned in Atlanta by a group of community advocates, particularly with the leadership of Black and brown, trans and queer women, folks who were formerly incarcerated and have gone through their own processes of recovery around substance use and mental health. And it was initially envisioned as the stopgap intervention in over-policing, right? But it was always grounded in the understanding that our biggest impact is demonstrating that non-law enforcement responses are the more appropriate response to harms that are associated with mental health crises, with substance use and survival activities. So we do that, we demonstrate that today by providing ongoing harm reduction-based case management and care navigation to the people who we divert, and working closely with the criminal legal system partners to continue sort of making that case person by person as we work to help folks stabilize themselves using strategies that work for them. So when the pandemic hit, we stopped accepting new diversions, and we instead joined other organizations to advocate to our police department and to city leadership to significantly curtail arrests. And I think people have seen this all over the country. You know, we saw arrests for city ordinance violations and for state level charges drop by over 50% during a 2-month period, right? And we saw around the country that police departments were issuing administrative orders. They were proactively saying, we are not going to make all of these sort of quality of life arrests or many others in response to the need to keep people more safe, right? And we can see today that that may in fact be harm reduction on multiple levels, right? Harm reduction for use of force, harm reduction for a global pandemic that is affecting folks in local jails, et cetera. Well, during the pandemic, sort of the height of it, we worked with prosecutors and public defenders who we work with every day to identify people in the local jails that could be released and diverted. But while we spoke, while we worked, I should say, to support jail releases, we have been telling everybody who will listen. We would speak to all of the players in that system who we count as partners in this work often, but to affirm that first and foremost, reducing the jail population is a policing issue. And I just want to take the opportunity to say that to this group, right? That before it's a jail issue, before it's a prosecutorial issue, before it's a court issue, it is a policing issue to reduce our jail populations, and we should direct our energies accordingly. So yesterday, June 15th, we started accepting pre-arrest diversions again. We are restarting diversions in a dramatically changed environment for two reasons. First, we've seen over the last few months that it is possible to move away from arrests for a large number of activities. It's possible, we've seen it happen, right? And second, cities and police departments and all of our institutions are in a moment of dramatic reckoning because of the organizing, the mobilization, and the demands coming out of the movement for Black lives. So Atlanta, like many cities around the country, is at a crossroads. And I'd like to just take my remaining minutes to offer my thoughts on what we could do right now to change course, as I think it's relevant, not just to Atlanta, but to others. So first off, I think we have to acknowledge that procedural reforms, those that make policing, incarceration, adjudication more efficient, more transparent, less tolerant of violence. A lot of reforms that many people have worked very hard on for lots of years, right? But procedural reforms are not sufficient, period. That's first. Second, I think we need to follow the lead of Black movement leaders, and we need to commit to reimagining how we address issues of community concern. That is at the crux of all of this. And I think there's really concrete steps that we can take to demonstrate that commitment. In Atlanta, what we are advocating for and what we are supporting other partners and what we are, more than anything, trying to demonstrate through our sort of practical, the practical strategy that we offer as a very small program, which is an alternative to arrest. But what we're advocating for is we need to take steps to significantly reduce police and community interactions. That is harm reduction, right? To reduce police and community interactions. And we can do that through administrative orders like we saw, similar to COVID-19 responses from police departments all over the country. And we can do that by beginning the process of reforming criminal codes to decriminalize and reclassify offenses. And really to lift up what are the offenses that we use right now to criminalize and punish mental health needs, substance use, poverty, survival activities for people who are marginalized from mainstream economies, whether because of their gender identity, because they are trans women who are being discriminated against, whether because of their previous records, conviction records, and et cetera. The second thing I would say that we can do immediately, that cities can do immediately to address this, is by identifying and investing in alternative response teams for a wide range of activities, right? So looking at, where are the quality of life teams? Where are the mediation teams, the crisis teams? We have models for that. We have successes in that. Now is the time for a major investment in standing up those teams and really investing in the people who can respond in more appropriate ways to what we know are public health concerns and other issues of community concern. And I think that looks like overhauling the 911 dispatch process and really looking at how we get from a concern to a response, and again, really focusing on how we reimagine what that response is. I think that's probably my time. So I'm going to pass the mic to Pastor Kenneth Glasgow with the Ordinary People Society in Dothan, Alabama. Thanks.
Hey, how y'all doing? I'm Pastor Glasgow, Kenneth Glasgow, the founder of the Ordinary People Society, the Prodigal Child Project out C4, and co-founder along with Darcy Nunn, the formerly incarcerated and convicted people's movement, our national organization. And I just want to talk to y'all today about the work that we have done. We've been doing this since 1994, one of the longest lasting criminal justice organizations doing reentry, a lot of service work and all. When we got into this reform and reentry and restoration, and wasn't sexy and romantic like it is now, all acceptable. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on is committing to service work. And now a lot of people, we thank God for Tony Myers and all y'all lifting this up, because a lot of people now are starting to get interested in the service work because they see that just getting people out of prison or out of jail is just one part of it. You know, what happens to their housing, what happens to their health, what happens to their education, if they do, what happens to their skill set, how they get jobs, this and that and the other. So what we did is continue. We've been doing this work for a long time. We feed about 300 people a day. We pride ourselves in our community. Now, we don't call them halfway houses. We call them transition houses. And the reason we don't call them halfway houses is because we don't do things halfway. And we've been able to curtail within Alabama, Florida, and Georgia the most. We've been able to curtail the relationship with the legislators and all that. So when this pandemic hit, we were already known as a service or agency or service organization for those that are incarcerated. So a lot of people was able to call us and ask on us with our expertise on what to do. So one of the first things we came up with the help of Deanna Hoskins and other people, other comrades, we came up with a bill, a congressional bill and a local bill that we put out to people on emergency release and emergency community supervision act, and to give them some kind of standards to go by on releasing people out of jail and prison. And I'll just go through that real briefly. Some of the things we told them was that incarcerated individuals, according to the CDC and the health experts, that are identified as vulnerable. There's COVID-19, the complications due to their medical conditions, including individuals who are pregnant, first and foremost, who have chronic lung disease and asthma, congestive heart failure, heart disease, have diabetes, and other conditions. We also talked to them about individuals who were like 50 years and older, the individuals who had 12 months or less, who should be out getting out anyway, paroled out if they're in prison or on supervision if they're in jail. Then we also talked to them about, what were they doing inside the prisons and jails to help with this pandemic. They couldn't comply with the social distancing. There was no way, because of the fact that, in prison and jail, they can't keep each other away from each other 6 feet. So we addressed that, and we really, really got hard on Alabama, Florida, and Georgia about that in Mississippi. What ended up happening was we started to deplete the jails and deplete a lot of the numbers in jails, but then came what? The service component. So we had to set up safe houses for people to get out, where they'll still have their social distancing, we'll still be able to get them tested and all. Because one of the things that people didn't understand is that even though we were fighting to get testing out here, no one was ever testing those that were inside. Prime example in Alabama, they would check the officers and just check their temperature when they go to work inside the prison. But anyway, 24 of them inside Tutwiler, which is the one and only female prison inside Alabama, ended up with 24 correctional officers testing positive. So this resulted in at least three different dorms testing positive, like 3 different people testing positive in the 150 unit dorm, 2 people tested positive in the 80 unit dorm, and then 2 or 3 in the 75 unit dorm. So they had to shut down the dorms. Now these prisons in Alabama, some of you are in New York. One of the big differences that I found out when I did the prison strike the first time in 2016, when we have our different, conference calls and all that, and the differences in the demands that they wanted from the inside, we found out that it was hard for people up north to recognize when we say that this is a replication or plantation, just like slavery. Because up north, people are locked up inside a wall, while down south, past the Mason-Dixon line, people are actually locked up outside. And they're with a horse, with a man in a shotgun, and you are out there in your shackles and your handcuffs doing work like you're still in the cotton fields. I mean, in all actuality, literally. So these are the things that people don't understand when it comes from the North and Southern aspect. So when we approached the COVID-19, we had to approach it from a different aspect. Not only your safety and the health-wise, we had to approach it with the fact that you are putting people in danger, because their approach was to just take them from inside the dorm and then lock them up outside in the warehouse. And they felt like that was compensating them. We collected over, I mean, thousands and thousands, close to millions bars of soap, hand sanitizer, all kind of different masks and everything, and took it to the Department of Corrections in order for them to give it out. They would not let us take it to the prison. And then we had to really fight them to make sure they pass it out, because they didn't want to pass out the hand sanitizer because they were afraid everybody was going to get drunk drinking the hand sanitizer. So we had to ask them, do you really think that people inside are going to put their health on the line and drink instead of use the hand sanitizer the way they should? What we have now is what I was afraid of, is the second round of the pandemic. Everybody's looking at the second round of the pandemic going on the outside. But I'm promising you all, on the inside, it is just as bad as it's not worse, because people are not getting tested. So we put that, we did amendments and reiterated within the bill again. Now we have to ask for the testing. One of the biggest problems we found out, even with them testing, that pertains to the people in prison. In jails, they were just letting people out. Like I heard my comrade Marilyn say earlier, even in Atlanta, they're just letting people out, but they're not testing them. And there was no provisions for them. So it went right back to the service component that I'm talking about again. Some of the other things that we were able to do is keep up with people. We did our FOIAs, we did our Open Records Act. We were able to keep up with the people that they did release. So therefore, we could provide them with the housing, with the clothes and the shelter and the testing and everything that they needed. With the help of Tony Myers and others, we were able to get funding to do so. And this is what we'll have to continuously do. I'm mentioning all that and reiterating myself, not repeating myself, but reiterating myself, is because this is what you're going to have to do now. We have a pandemic and everybody's looking at how it's returning and how they might close it back up. But inside, there's a death trap. Inside the prisons and jail, it has become a death trap because there's no way for them to do the social distancing and no way for them to commit their own health values, precautions, preventions. The other thing we have been doing is using it as the avenue and the apparatus in order to train people, teach people. I'm very well known for voting rights. One of the first people to ever get voting rights inside the jails. In Alabama, we won a lawsuit to where they could vote out of prison. We have on the absentee ballot. I am currently incarcerated in jail or in prison. And the reason I need an absentee ballot, first time ever done in history, I won Florida in 2007 before that. And what we have been able to do is get people to start concentrating, not on so much them dying, because people on the inside are worried about them dying, but they concentrate on organizing each other, how they can prevent this sickness from taking over them and what they can do on the inside. So we tell them to start washing their clothes even more. And start begging for more sanitizer. And I'm talking about cleaning supplies and all. Because inside the prisons and jails, y'all, they only give out cleaning supplies once in the morning and once in the evening. Now we got them giving them out about 3 or 4 different times a day. These are just some of the things that we've been able to do. I could push the bill out. Tony Myers and Victoria, y'all will be able to pass it around. We also have a toolkit, our toolkit on organizing and getting people in jail trained in order to organize how to vote, organize some prevention measures and taking care of themselves and self-healing and self-care while they're incarcerated, that a whole bunch of formerly incarcerated people and currently incarcerated people have put together as well. So with all that being said, I'll rest my case right now and pass it on to my colleague, Carlton Mayers, Esquire, that is.
Thank you very much, Pastor Glasgow. I want to say that it's going to be hard to follow such a great just summary of the great work you're doing in Alabama. I'm actually have done some work with Dorsey Nunn in California, so that's what's up, and with Desmond Meade in Florida. So I would definitely like to connect with you. So thank you very much for having me here. My name is Carlton Mayers II. I lead criminal justice reform policy at Heartland Alliance for Human Needs and Human Rights as the Senior Policy Manager of Criminal Justice Reform. Heartland Alliance is a leading anti-poverty nonprofit community-based organization in the Midwest. We work to transform the Illinois criminal justice system by tearing down barriers to employment, housing, and dignity, and by creating opportunities that support safety in communities. We also provide various direct services to impoverished populations, both domestically and internationally. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic in Illinois, Governor Pritzker has been for the past few months and continues to, through executive orders, release people early from Illinois Department of Corrections, also known as IDOC. The governor's office requests Heartland Alliance assistance with developing a reentry transitional plan and providing adequate post-release reentry supports, such as housing, healthcare, employment, etc. Two other reentry reform organizations in Illinois, being Safer Foundation and TASK, are also working with the governor's office and lieutenant governor's office to provide post-release triage of people released early from Illinois Department of Corrections to identify each person's needs and to provide referrals for needed services to Heartland Alliance and other organizations that provide direct services. Some of these services include providing food, clothing, financial assistance, telehealth substance use and mental health services, physical health care, medication continuity, employment services, and housing. People receive their referrals either on site, over video, or telephonically. Currently, the governor's office has released over 1,000 people from Illinois Department of Corrections due to the pandemic. The first 100 people released early were considered a low risk to public safety and consisted of mothers with babies and young children, the elderly, the infirmed, and people with no violent or sex offenses on their records. However, since then, this has changed. And now those released early also include people with sex and violent offenses on their records. For this effort, Heartland Alliance focuses on providing direct services in healthcare, such as substance use treatment, primary medical care, and medication-assisted treatment. And we provide reentry supports to people with violent offenses on their criminal records, which includes cognitive behavioral therapy. Nonetheless, a significant hurdle is a lack of transitional housing placement options for people released early from Illinois Department of Corrections. I know we've heard this from some of the previous speakers in their jurisdictions as well. Most people released were provided approved host sites for shelter, but secure host sites are becoming more limited. It's also important to note that there were concerns about people being released early from incarceration, further spreading the virus if they show symptoms and/or have tested positive for the virus. To address this issue, these individuals are quarantined for 14 days in separate facilities before released into the public. Relatedly, at Heartland Alliance, we believe that housing is a human right, and we advocate to reform policies and laws to end collateral consequences, or what we call permanent punishments, on people with criminal records trying to access public housing. Currently, we're in the Restoring Rights and Opportunities Coalition of Illinois, also known as ROCKY, which consists of Heartland Alliance, Cabrini Green Legal Aid, Community Renewal Society, and Chicago Community for the Homeless. ROCKY advocates for the passage of the Public Housing Access Bill, which would require that every public housing authority in Illinois has a criminal background screening process that limits the offenses that local public housing authorities are allowed to consider, meaning no consideration of non-convictions like arrests and juvenile records. And public housing authorities can only consider a person's background within 6 months from the date of application for public housing. This is the look-back period. Likewise, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Agency, also called HUD, recently issued notices for new waivers that provide public housing authorities the discretion and flexibility for faster access and more access to public housing that can benefit people with criminal records. Now, how does this look? In regards to faster access, this could look like a public housing authority revising their screening process so that instead of doing the background check in advance of admitting somebody into public housing, you do the background check after admitting somebody into public housing. How does this look for more access? Well, this looks like public housing authorities revising their guest policy so that people that are currently residing in public housing can allow a loved one with a criminal record to live with them without the threat of eviction. Before these waivers were issued, if an individual living in public housing had somebody live with them who has a criminal record, that person residing in public housing could be evicted by the public housing authority. Due to the pandemic and these recent HUD waivers, we tried to include the Public Housing Access Bill in the COVID-19 emergency legislation this past legislative session. However, we were unsuccessful and there were no criminal justice reform bills passed this session in Illinois. There was also some backlash to the decarceration effort from conservative lawmakers and law enforcement. For instance, the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police and some Republican Illinois state senators released separate letters sharply criticizing Governor Pritzker for releasing hundreds of people from the Illinois Department of Corrections and stating that the releases jeopardize public safety. Additionally, a Republican Illinois state representative publicized the names of 13 people released from Illinois Department of Corrections who have violent offenses on their records and received sentence commutation. This state representative said that releasing these individuals puts the public at risk. For next steps, we are very concerned that left unchecked, messages like these could negatively impact the decarceration effort. Around the time these letters were published, Heartland Alliance and an ally, Restore Justice Foundation, published an op-ed on the dichotomy of violent and nonviolent offenses, in which we highlight that there is a difference between being accused of, convicted of something that the state deems violent versus being a violent person. This distinction implies that some are deserving of health and safety while others are not. And this is not true. We are also currently working with our Rocky partners to respond to these letters from directly impacted people. We will reintroduce the Public Housing Access Bill for next session, next year in 2021, so that it will be aligned with the COVID-19 recovery process and use the data from the implementation of the HUD waivers to demonstrate the feasibility of allowing people with criminal records access to public housing. In the meantime, federal funds from the CARES Act is a solution for Illinois to subsidize housing for people released early from Illinois Department of Corrections. And we remain vigilant on how these funds will be administered by the state. Lastly, in addition to race inequities, the pandemic has also magnified Illinois' lack of adequate reentry programming from Illinois Department of Corrections for both pre and post-release. The referral initiative has established a good system to get reentry supports to people released early from Illinois Department of Corrections due to the pandemic. Nevertheless, we plan to advocate for more investment in pre and post-release reentry programming. Ultimately, all of this relates to ongoing public calls and also to what the other speakers on this call, all of them amazing, have been talking about, which are the calls to invest more in and rely more on community resources to prevent criminality. Now, I'm not sure if it's been posted in the chat box, but please do look at the chat box. There should be 2 links in there from Heartland Alliance. One of them is Heartland Alliance's op-ed that I just mentioned earlier around the dichotomy between violent and nonviolent offenses. It was published a couple of months ago in the Spotlight, and it's titled, "COVID-19 doesn't care what's in your record. We shouldn't either." The second link to look at is Heartland Alliance's city, state, and federal policy recommendations as it relates to COVID-19. And lastly, The final thing, really the final thing I'm going to say here is that Heartland Alliance, we're actually around the end of this month, I believe, releasing our poverty report. And the theme of it is going to be never fully free, the scale and impact of permanent punishments on people with criminal records in Illinois. So be on the lookout, and thank you for having me. Look forward to working with everybody, not only watching, but also those who also presented on today's call. Now I'm gonna pass it over to Victoria from the Legal Action Center to close this out. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Victoria. I'm the State Advocacy Coordinator for Legal Action Center's No Health Equals No Justice campaign. And I would just like to thank everyone in our audience for joining us today. I would also like to express my most sincere thanks to the panelists and for everyone who worked behind the scenes to make today's webinar happen. Before we close out, I would like to encourage you to check out the links that have been posted in the chat. I would also like for you to post any questions that you have, either in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll make sure that we include those in our Q&A fact sheet. We'll leave the webinar open for 10 additional minutes to give you an opportunity to do those things. Additionally, I would like to invite you all to join us next Tuesday for our webinar entitled Health and Justice, Reclaiming Resources to Support Community-Led Solutions. On this webinar, speakers will discuss strategies to reclaim federal and state funds and reprioritize new funding decisions in a way that invests in communities rather than in law enforcement. Finally, please look out for future communications from us. We will be sending out a link to the upcoming webinar, as well as a survey for this webinar and additional materials. That concludes today's webinar, and thank you all again. Have a great day.
Thank you.